Welcome to Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Mafia: The Old Country. I played it on the Xbox Series X. It's also available on the Series S, PS5, and PC. So let's get into the story. It's the early 1900s, and you play as Enzo, who was sold to the sulfur mines when he was a child, and he's been there ever since, and he wants to get the hell out. It doesn't help that the sulfur mines are run by some really despicable mafiosos. He escapes, winds up joining up with some other mafiosos, and rising the ranks. He may or may not meet the love of his life along the way. He may or may not kill some people along the way. He may or may not do some crime along the way. And in reality, he does all of those things. There are some awesome twists and turns throughout the story, but I will say the one place it disappointed me was during the ending. There were some moments where I was just like, nah, don't do exactly what you're gonna do exactly what you did. Yeah, just some moments, especially in the ending, that were a little too predictable, although there were some great twists and turns along the way through the ending. I thought it was going to end very specifically a certain way, and it didn't go quite that way, which was nice. But there were plenty of things in the ending that played out, you know, I saw it coming. Which is not to say that I didn't enjoy the story, because I did. I don't think any of those things ruined it for me. But when you've been watching entertainment type stuff as long as I have, you start to see some things and you start to know where it's going to go, and it would be nice to have some twists and turns that you weren't predicting. Let's get on to the audio. The first thing I'm going to say is I enjoyed the music in this game, not necessarily anything I would listen to outside of this, but I think it worked perfectly for the game. And when you are traveling the world, it's a little quieter, it's a little more subtle, but it's there and you do notice it, and it's nice because, you know, it gives you just something else. As for the voiceover work, I think it's really well done. There are a couple of things that they say, and they say them a little too frequently, and I don't know if that's just something that was really common at the time or if they were just trying to like ham it up slightly. There's one insult that they used, I can't remember exactly what it was, but after you've heard it about 52,000 times, it starts to be more comical than feel insulting. Now moving on from there, it's the sound effects. I really liked the sound effects in this game. I did notice a couple of times where they were out of sync or they were missing, but they were very small. They weren't super noticeable. They weren't, you know, anything that was going to really take you out of the moment. But I think they did a good job, whether it's just the world around you, your horse, your car, your gun, your knife, any of those things, all those different things, I think they did a very good job with. The sound effects of you walking around, other people walking around, the ambient noises when you're in a town, I thought all of that was well done and it helped build a solid atmosphere. And now we'll move on to the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and this is a third-person action game. And I'm going with that rather than open world because while it is a fairly open world, you don't necessarily have the freedom to roam. You're rarely on like a time crunch, so if you wanted to, you could do some more exploring and look for things like collectibles, maybe go to the shop, maybe stop by your house and change out your clothes. You can do some small things like that, but it's not like there's side quests or side missions. This is a pretty linear game overall. Like I said, you can do some exploring and find like the collectible areas. There's some photography, there's newspapers, there's things like that, as well as items. But that's about the extent of it. Otherwise, you really are just playing through key moments in Enzo's life and his rise in this organization as a member of the Teresi family. Now, as I mentioned, you can get around using a horse or a car. They do have you doing a good amount of driving, and I would generally listen to the dialogue. It would be over before I was halfway through the trip, and then you could skip the trip, which was something I actually really appreciated. There were some trips that were a little more important than others, and they didn't seem to offer the ability to skip. I think was smart because then you had more conversations. Now, the rest of the time, you are on foot and you are, you know, you're doing mobster shit. There's a big focus on knife fighting in this, which I'll get into in a minute. But I also found that there was a big focus on stealth, which I found myself doing a lot more than knife fighting. If I was going to order things, it was like shooting, stealth, knife fighting. And I think the shooting worked well. I liked the aim assist. It was a bit lazy, but I also was feeling a bit lazy. It will really drag your reticle onto the enemies if you're within a certain distance of them. Like if your reticle's within, I would say, you know, a yard or two, it will drag it over to them. It won't necessarily guarantee you a headshot, but it'll drag it over there. Now, as for sneaking, you do a good amount of sneaking. They have the whole sneaky sense where you can see people through walls, which I felt was a little weird in a game like this, but they had it anyways. You take down enemies, you can loot them, which is very useful in the gunfights, honestly, because you'll get ammo and bandages, which I found I needed more in gunfights than any other time. And then most of the missions culminate in some kind of knife fight with some kind of mafioso or some kind of like dude that you need to deal with. And the one thing I will say is, while the idea of each knife fight is fairly simple, you have the powerful attacks that they'll do, you have the light attacks that they'll do, you can dodge the heavies, you can parry the light attacks, you have your light attacks, swiping and stabbing, and you have a heavy attack to break their guard, all of that pretty normal stuff. But what I thought they did a good job with was each of the people you would knife fight really did fight differently. I mean, they would all do some similar things, but they would have some different attack patterns, which I thought was cool. And obviously, as you went through the game, their attack patterns would get more advanced, making it more challenging for you. There are some great action set pieces, some great car chases, horse chases, thrilling escape from the mine, things like that, and I really appreciate it. I thought they did an awesome job with that. It felt very cinematic. And I'm gonna say, I played this on normal difficulty, and it was a pretty forgiving game. If you're losing in a knife fight, you'll get locked into this thing where you basically just have to tap X repeatedly to win like a little scuffle, and you'll get a little bit of health back. There's not a huge punishment for like losing a race. And in fact, losing a race can really help you out. I lost a race multiple times intentionally, and it got me basically closer and closer to the car in front every time I did it. It was kind of cheesing it, but I couldn't restart the race, so it was really the only way to get through that. Which was actually kind of frustrating in that situation because I'd finally sorted out the mechanics of the race and the vehicle, and I was like, oh, I can win this, I'd love to restart it, and I just couldn't. Overall though, I enjoyed it. I think it worked well for what this game is, which is a very story-driven experience, and the gameplay worked well in tandem. Now let's move on to the controls, and the controls are for the most part good. It's the knife fighting that throws me off a bit because I'm used to most games like X and Y will be your attacks, and Y was an attack, but it wasn't like my primary attack. Whereas in this game, X is parry and B is attack, and that threw me off. There were times in the knife fights that I kind of screwed myself because I just didn't immediately go to that. Overall, the movement, the steering, all of that I think was well done. I think the camera controls were good. Then we've got the graphics and visuals, which I'm gonna say, this is a very good looking game, although there are a few elements that I think could have been improved upon. Like there's a point in the game where Enzo starts growing in some facial hair and it could look better than it does. And actually other characters' facial hair does look better than his, which is kind of weird since he's the main character. There are also just other small details that I would have loved to see, like I love to see in most games, footprints, you know, walking through grass, brushing it, things like that. But that being said, I think the facial expressions were incredibly well done. Like the graphics, the performances, the capturing of the performances, all of that are great, and they obviously add to this mafia drama. I really did enjoy the characters' looks. I think they did a great job making a lot of them feel unique and fit their personalities very well. Whether it's their style, how they dress, how they comb their hair, how they basically move around, things like that. I think doing that adds to it, and it really does breathe life into each of these characters, the individuals. And I do think there are some great details in the faces, the wrinkles, the textures, the hair. I think all of that was incredibly well done. I think a lot of the performances are great. And I think the world looks amazing. You get this great like old Italian kind of mountain vineyard, because you are in a vineyard, and valley. And it's a beautiful landscape. The towns are beautiful. There's a lot of detail in the old like cobble streets, the old stone buildings, things like that. Although I will say there are some other things that aren't done as well. There are times where fabrics look great. There are times where fabrics look like shit. There are times where you can see the fabrics moving while they're walking in a great way. And then there are times where people's hands are just clipping through their coats. It could be a bit better. Since I'm bitching about things, there were some times where the game could have run smoother. Like chapter 10, there was a really dramatic moment and it kind of ran like shit, and there were things just kind of like freezing and then happening, and then things just kind of popping up. There were also some times where there was texture popping in some dramatic scenes where like a dude's like sitting there already talking, and then all of a sudden his texture comes in and you're like, yeah, that was very noticeable. None of that ruined the game for me. The other thing I would complain about is the load times, at least on the Series X, but the load times could have been better. And if you're restarting sections, like if you screw up in a stealth section or die or any of those things, you're then stuck in a load time that takes considerably longer than you'd be hoping for. Okay, so let's get into the wrap up. Overall, I did really enjoy this experience. Overall, I don't have a problem recommend playing this game. But also, there's not a huge reason for me to go back and play it a second time. There's not a lot of replayability there. If you really love Mafia stories and things like that, then you may come back to this at some point because it's not a crazy long game and it is a good experience. And it's not crazy expensive, so I can honestly say I would recommend playing this game. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me what's your favorite Mafia movie? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one. Welcome to Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Mafia: The Old Country. Is it just Mafia Old Country or is it The Old Country? Fuck me. The Old Country, damn it.